Most women think the hardest part of divorce is emotional. And while that's partly true, the real damage often shows up later, in your bank account. Hidden inside what looks like a fair alimony agreement are financial traps that most women don't see coming until it's far too late. You might think you're protected. You've got a court order, a written agreement, maybe even a lawyer you trust. But what you're not being told, and what many women over 50 only realize after the ink is dry, is that some alimony proposals are designed to fail you from the start. From missing legal protections to income games, buried debt, and promises that disappear the moment your ex decides he's done paying. These red flags can cost you tens of thousands, and even put your retirement at risk. In this video, we're going to reveal 7 of the most commonly overlooked financial red flags hiding inside alimony deals. These are things most women don't question, because they're wrapped in legal language or masked by false generosity. But if you miss them, the consequences are real, and often irreversible. So if you're in the middle of a divorce, or even thinking about agreeing to terms, watch this video all the way through. Because knowing what to spot now could save you years of stress, struggle, and financial regret later. Let's get started. 1. Alimony that doesn't adjust for inflation. At first glance, a fixed monthly alimony amount might feel like security. You see a number, say $2,000 a month, and it feels like something you can rely on. But here's the problem. That amount doesn't stretch as far 5 years from now. And in 10? It might barely cover groceries. Most women don't think to ask, will this payment adjust over time? Because when you're focused on just getting through the divorce, the idea of negotiating inflation into the deal sounds complicated or even greedy. But it's not. It's necessary. Inflation quietly chips away at your financial stability. The cost of living increases every year, sometimes drastically. Rent rises, utilities creep up, healthcare premiums explode. And if your alimony stays flat while everything else gets more expensive, what once felt like enough slowly becomes a financial trap. This is especially important for women who are out of the workforce for years, raising children, managing the home, supporting their husband's career. You may not have the same earning potential now, which means alimony isn't just extra money, it's your lifeline. And if that lifeline stays frozen while life keeps getting more expensive, you could find yourself slipping into financial strain faster than you ever expected. It's easy to feel like asking for cost of living adjustments makes you sound demanding. But in reality, it's one of the most responsible, future-focused decisions you can make. Because what you agree to today will follow you for years, or decades, to come. And sadly, many women don't realize how much they've lost until it's too late. But that's just one hidden issue. The next one? It can leave you with nothing if your ex suddenly stops paying. And few women realize just how vulnerable they are. 2. No legal enforcement mechanism built in. You'd be surprised how many alimony agreements rely entirely on trust. A written promise. A monthly amount. But what happens if your ex stops paying? What if he loses his job? Or claims he did? What if he simply decides you've gotten enough, and ghosts the payments? If there's no enforcement mechanism built into the agreement, no automatic wage garnishment, no penalty clauses, no backup plan, you're left with 2 painful options. Confront him personally, or go back to court. And both can be expensive, stressful, and slow. Here's the harsh truth. Just because alimony is in the agreement doesn't mean you'll actually get it. Courts are backed up. Lawyers cost money. And unless you have the resources to keep fighting every time there's a late payment, you may eventually give up. Not because you're wrong, but because you're exhausted. That's exactly how many women get trapped. The burden falls on them to chase down what they were promised. Meanwhile, bills pile up. Retirement savings get drained. And resentment grows, not just toward their ex, but toward themselves for not seeing it coming. It's not about expecting the worst. It's about protecting yourself if the worst happens. Always ask, what happens if he doesn't pay? Can the court garnish wages? Are there late fees built in? Will the payments be deducted directly from a pension or employer? If the agreement doesn't make it clear, you may be the one left cleaning up the mess. Because without enforcement, alimony is just a suggestion, not a guarantee. And that leads directly to the next financial red flag. One that starts out looking generous, until you realize it's hiding something much more costly. 3. Lump sum offers that look generous but cost you more. When the alimony conversation turns to a lump sum payout, many women breathe a sigh of relief. It feels cleaner, easier, and somehow empowering. No monthly reminders, no waiting for checks, no back and forth with your ex. Just one large payment, up front. But here's what most people miss. That lump sum is almost always smaller than what you'd receive over time. And worse, once it's in your hands, the responsibility to make it last is entirely on you. Let's say you're offered $100,000 in lieu of monthly alimony. At first, it sounds like a windfall. But do the math. If you were supposed to receive $2,500 a month for 10 years, that's $300,000. Suddenly, that $100,000 doesn't look so generous. So why would someone agree to it? Because they're not told about the long-term consequences. They're emotionally drained, eager to move on, and tempted by the simplicity of a one-time deal. The legal language makes it sound fair, even generous. But the fine print is rarely designed with your financial survival in mind. And let's not forget taxes. Depending on how the lump sum is structured, you may owe more in taxes than you would with monthly payments. And without proper financial advice, you could spend it too quickly or invest it poorly. Once it's gone, it's gone. There's no going back to ask for more. No second chances. And no one to blame but yourself. Which is the hardest part. If you're being offered a lump sum, pause. Ask a financial advisor to run the numbers. Ask yourself, is this truly fair? Or is it just faster? Because speed might feel like relief now, but it can cost you everything later. And speaking of things that sound good but hide danger, the next red flag is something women agree to all the time without realizing they're signing away their future. 4. Waiving the right to future adjustments. This is one of the most dangerous clauses buried in alimony agreements, and most women sign it without realizing what they're giving up. It's called a non-modifiability clause. And once it's in there, you're locked in. At first glance, it doesn't seem like a big deal. You're promised a fixed amount each month. Maybe it feels fair. Maybe it even seems generous. But life isn't static. Things change, and if your needs go up or his ability to pay increases, you're stuck with the original deal. Let that sink in. If inflation rises, your rent goes up, your health declines, or you outlive your retirement savings, too bad. You waived the right to ask for more. Meanwhile, if he remarries, gets promoted, or inherits money, you don't get a dime more, because your agreement can't be modified. It was final. Now imagine the reverse. What if he loses his job, claims financial hardship, or simply stops paying? He can go to court and ask for a reduction. But you? You gave up your voice. This is how women get trapped in agreements that age badly. What felt secure at 52 starts to look terrifying at 68. And by then, it's often too late to fight it. The most painful part? Many women don't even realize they signed away this right until years later. When something happens, and their lawyer has to break the news, there's nothing you can do. So before you sign anything, ask, can this agreement be modified in the future? What happens if my needs change? What if I get sick? What if I can't work anymore? Because the right to adjust is the right to survive. And when it's gone, it's not just money you lose, it's peace of mind. And sadly, the next red flag is just as invisible, and even more emotionally manipulative. 5. Generous offers that quietly undervalue your time. Sometimes the most dangerous red flag doesn't look threatening at all. It shows up wrapped in what feels like kindness. A larger monthly payment. A lump sum that sounds impressive. A tone of, I want to be fair to you. But when you break it down, what he's actually offering may be a fraction of what your time, sacrifices, and support were truly worth. Here's what often gets overlooked. You may not have brought home a paycheck every year, but you absolutely contributed to his ability to earn one. You kept the household running, raised the kids, gave up promotions or careers to support his. That labor has real financial value, but it rarely gets calculated. So when he says, I'll give you $2,000 a month, and makes it sound generous, ask yourself, compared to what? What's the cost of the life you helped him build? What would it take for you to maintain even a portion of that lifestyle on your own? And more importantly, how long will that offer actually last before inflation, healthcare, or basic living costs start to erode it? And don't forget, some of these offers are tied to emotional strings. The guilt play. I'm doing this because I still care about you. But that emotional framing can be used to push you into accepting less, while thinking you're being taken care of. One woman I spoke with was offered a lump sum of $100,000 instead of long-term monthly support. It sounded huge, until she realized it barely covered 5 years of expenses. After that, she was on her own. No job, no skills, no safety net. So here's the rule. If it sounds generous, pause and do the math. Fair doesn't mean flashy. Fair means sustainable. It means covering the life you gave up to help someone else build theirs. Because beneath every sweet-sounding settlement can hide a serious shortfall, and the cost of accepting it could last longer than the marriage ever did. 6. No enforcement mechanism if he stops paying. Here's a red flag that doesn't show up until everything falls apart. What happens if he just stops paying? It sounds unbelievable, but it happens more often than most people think. He loses a job, gets remarried, decides he's paid enough, or worse, starts punishing you financially out of spite. Suddenly, the checks stop coming. And unless your agreement has real teeth, you're left with court dates, legal fees, and an uphill battle to enforce what was already promised. A lot of women assume the divorce decree protects them, that the court will automatically step in. But unless there's clear language, with penalties, consequences, and enforcement options spelled out, you're stuck chasing money that was already yours. It gets even messier if he's self-employed. He can hide income, manipulate expenses, or claim he can't afford payments. And without a built-in enforcement plan, you may not see a dime for months, or even years. I've seen women who had to go back to court multiple times just to get what they were owed. Each time draining more energy, more money, and more hope. And here's the worst part. Some settlements don't even allow for enforcement beyond a certain point. If it's structured off the books, or through a vague verbal understanding, there's almost nothing a judge can do. That's why it's critical, before you sign anything, to include detailed enforcement language. Automatic wage garnishment. Penalties for late payments. Court oversight. A backup plan if he becomes unavailable or moves assets. Because without that, you're trusting someone who's no longer invested in your future to do the right thing indefinitely. And that's not a strategy, that's a gamble. So before you accept any terms, ask, what happens if he stops paying? Not in theory, on paper, with consequences. Because if there's no answer, you've just found one of the most expensive mistakes women make in divorce. 7. Assuming alimony replaces a full retirement plan. Here's the trap too many women fall into. They mistake alimony for security. They see the monthly number, breathe a sigh of relief, and think, I'll be okay. But alimony isn't a retirement plan. It's a temporary patch, not a lifelong parachute. In reality, most alimony agreements don't last forever. They taper off. They end when he retires. They vanish if you remarry. And yet, many women build their entire future around that one stream of income, only to realize too late that it was never meant to carry them through the next 20 or 30 years. What makes it worse? Few think to ask, what happens when this money stops? Social Security might not cover the gap. Your own retirement savings might be limited, especially if you took time off to raise children or supported his career instead of building your own. Suddenly, you're 65, the alimony ends, and the ground drops out beneath you. It's heartbreaking. Because by the time most women realize this, the ink is dry. The house is gone. The assets are split. And the window to secure long-term financial protection has already closed. Here's the truth. If your divorce agreement doesn't include long-term planning, IRAs, pensions, survivor benefits, even life insurance policies in case he passes away, then you might be looking at a cliff, not a cushion. Alimony should never be the whole plan. It's a tool, not a solution. So if the proposal looks good on paper now, ask yourself, does it still look good at 72? 78? What about when your health changes, or the economy shifts, or he stops paying? Because you don't just need stability for the next few years. You need it for the next few decades. And if your settlement doesn't reflect that, it's not protection. It's a delay. And you deserve better than that. Looking back, the most painful mistakes are the ones we didn't even realize we were making, until it was too late. So many women walk into divorce believing they've protected themselves. only to discover, months or even years later, that what they agreed to wasn't nearly enough. The alimony looked generous. The terms sounded fair. But buried in the fine print were assumptions, blind spots, and loopholes that left them financially exposed. If there's one message you take away from this, let it be this: alimony is not a safety net, unless you make it one. Every line of that agreement matters. Every clause is either a protection or a risk. And if you don't look closely, if you don't ask hard questions before signing, you may find yourself fighting battles you never expected. Not in court, but in your everyday life. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can still take control. You can still ask for clarity, demand long-term protections, and refuse to settle for vague promises. Because this isn't just about money. It's about dignity, stability, and freedom. The kind that lasts not just for the next year, but for the rest of your life. So if you're standing at the edge of this decision, or know someone who is, don't rush. Don't assume. And don't let the fear of conflict stop you from asking for what you deserve. Your future self is counting on you to be strong, smart, and unshakable, right now. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What's one thing you learned that changed how you think about alimony or divorce planning? Leave a comment below and share your insight. It could help someone else more than you realize. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us keep making content that informs, protects, and empowers people just like you. We'll see you in the next one.